Alright, so for today, I'll be studying anomalous pulmonary venous return, but this time it's going to be the total instead of the partial. So in the last video, I talked about anomalous pulmonary venous return, but partial. For this one, it's total. So for total, the difference is all of the pulmonary veins, the right and the left, are abnormal. They all drain to the right side of the heart instead of the left side where it should be. There are various forms of this defect. These are the types: the supracardiac, infracardiac, and intracardiac. When the pulmonary venous return empties on the right side of the heart, there's a systemic desaturation, because instead of being pumped, the oxygen-rich blood being pumped systemically, it is then pumped to the lungs, back into the lungs. Therefore, the systemic blood flow would require a right-to-left shunting, and usually it's associated with atrial septal defect. So when there's an atrial septal defect, so this is your right atrium, left atrium, it all goes back, it all dumps that oxygenated blood here in the right atrium. This isn't like the right orientation, but I'm just saying that it's dumping all that oxygenated blood to the right atrium. For it to circulate, this is closed in the normal heart. For it to circulate to our systemic flow, it has to get to the left atrium. So the way to do that is to have an atrial septal defect. So that's how our body compensates. Sometimes they even do a septostomy, which is creating a hole there or enlarging the hole that's already there. So that way the blood, the oxygenated blood, goes from the right atrium to the left atrium, and then it can be pumped systemically. That way we get oxygen throughout the body. So like I said, oxygen-rich blood is on the right side. There's a right to left shunting to get saturation on the left side as well. So now we're going to talk about the common types. The most common is the supracardiac. This is the picture right here. The supracardiac anomaly is when the pulmonary veins, the red ones on the right and the left, are drained to a vertical vein right here. That's an anomalous vein. The vertical vein. It's a vertical vein, and it connects to the innominate vein. The innominate vein is a vein that we have that, I think it's the one that drains our brachial veins. Like it's right here, the clavicle here. I don't know, but it's this innominate vein. You all can Google that. So from the vertical vein, the pulmonary veins connect to the innominate vein, and the innominate vein then drains to the superior vena cava. So the blood flow would look like the lungs. This is the lungs. Goes to our pulmonary veins. Goes to the pulmonary veins on both sides. It then connects to the vertical vein right here, and then the vertical vein goes to the innominate vein. The innominate vein goes to the superior vena cava, and then back to our right atrium. And if there's no ASD or atrial septal defect, the right atrium pumps it to the right ventricle, which pumps it back to the lungs. So it's just a continuous cycle of pumping oxygenated blood to the lungs. Then our lungs is very happy because we get all the oxygen, but the body doesn't. If there is an ASD, then this oxygenated blood will mix. We'll have a shunting from the right to the left, and then we can circulate that blood, the mixed blood. It's not completely saturated, but at least it's mixed. So that's the first type, the supracardiac. Let me see if I missed anything. Anomalous vein. Okay. And another type, which is less common, is the infracardiac, which is our second drawing. This one may drain below the diaphragm. So well, my drawing is inaccurate, but this part here is below the diagram supposedly. The diaphragm. So below the diaphragm. So the pulmonary veins are here. It drains in the hepatic portal vein and connects to the inferior vena cava. So again, this one is the supra because it's above, and then the infra is below. It just connects still to our right atrium, but just in the lower part, which is our inferior vena cava. This type always is associated with an obstruction. So when there's an obstruction, it is always an emergency surgery. Yep, it's a surgical emergency if there's a obstructed pulmonary venous return. The less common type is the intracardiac, which doesn't have any anomalous vein, but it is not connected to the correct atrium. So what it does, it's pulmonary vein left and right are connecting to the coronary sinus and draining to our right atrium. Coronary sinus is supposedly for our coronaries, but it also connects, the pulmonary veins also connects to that area and drains to our right atrium. Okay. There could be an association of pulmonary vein stenosis in this kind of diagnosis. If there is an obstruction to the pulmonary venous return, we may see severe cyanosis and acidosis in our pediatric population who are suffering this kind of defect. If there is no obstruction, we will have the obligate mixing, or what's that? Right? Okay. Obligate mixing of saturated and desaturated blood in the right atrium through the right to left shunt. The obstruction could be in our pulmonary veins right here. I think this is the one, yeah, the B right here. There's almost always a association with pulmonary vein stenosis or obstruction. If there is no obstruction, we get the obligate mixing, the right to left shunt, and then the ASD is there because we want to mix the desaturated and the saturated blood. Let me see. Therapy for this is creating surgery. It's creating an anastomosis to the pulmonary vein confluence to the left atrium. So basically, we are connecting our pulmonary veins back to where it should be connected to the left atrium. The anomalous vein, which is the vertical vein, and the vertical vein and the infracardiac vein, this one, are both ligated, so the blood doesn't flow there, and ASD is then closed. We close the ASD because the pulmonary venous return is now back in the left atrium, so we don't want that to mix anymore. And then, did I go over this? Oh yeah, I went over that. So yeah, supracardiac, infracardiac, intracardiac. Supracardiac is above the heart. It connects to the innominate vein, to the superior vena cava. Also, I forgot to write down here. There's the vertical vein, and then the innominate vein, and then the superior vena cava. This one, the infracardiac, connects to the hepatic portal vein, and then it connects to the inferior vena cava, which is why it's called infra, below. Most commonly associated with an obstruction, treatment, surgery. Intracardiac is when it's connected to the right atrium via the coronary sinus. Like I said, pulmonary vein stenosis may be associated with this illness. There may be an obstruction, there may not be an obstruction. Therapy, all surgery, closure of the ASD, ligation of the anomalous vein, and creating anastomosis to put the circulation back to the left atrium. There's varying degrees of cyanosis depending on the severity of the mixture of the blood in the right to left atrium. If there's no mixture or very little mixture, we will have a very cyanotic baby. If there's a lot of mixture, or if there's enough saturation going back to our body, they might not be that cyanotic, but we may still see other signs of desaturation. That's it.